Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Oksana is an executive editor, a writer and journalist of Krytyka Magazine. And our first question about that law will be, what do you think is the most controversial about that law?
The most controversial is actually not the law itself, but the amendments made to other Ukrainian laws, and for example, to the criminal code, because as far as I know, the punishment for using this symbol is even more severe than in Germany.
Well, what is the punishment here?
It's like up to 5 years, and as far as I know, in Germany it's like 2 years or a fine. So I think it's too strict in this area.
Well, where is this law coming from? I mean, why do you think we're having this now? Because we were talking about it before. It had quite a bit of support. It had, I think, 250 members of parliament who voted for it.
Yes, yes, it was more. It was 254 out of
254 out of 450.
Out of 450,
which is not small. Parts of it seemed rushed almost.
Yes, but if we look into the content of this law. What is it about? Is it really about condemning communist regimes or anti-human regimes? Is it about condemning regimes or something else?
Well, it's not only about communist regimes, it's also about Nazi regime. And I think it's very interesting point, because we have this discussion, because there is a mentioning of Soviet symbols, of communist symbols in this law. I think the reaction and the discussion would be much more calm if not for this mentioning, if it was only about Nazi symbols. Actually, we had this norm before, because
condemning.
Actually, the most important and the crucial change now is including to this list of outlawed symbols communist and Soviet symbols. Actually, that's the point, and that's the question.
But some people would argue, I mean, it's time for this, that other countries that, had communist systems, they've moved on, they've replaced symbols, where in Kiev or other parts of Ukraine, it's still quite common to see hammers and sickles, it's quite common to have Soviet names. I mean, isn't this just part of trying to have a more modern society?
Yes, but in this case, we should not only take into account the Ukrainian context, but also the global context. For example, you have bars or cafes like KGB bar or something like this in many Western cities, but it's hard to. It's kind of
so
fun.
Would this law ban the KGB bar?
No. It's not about that.
I think it would, because it really bans even some souvenir products. It bans. So I think a bar would be banned, probably.
But the point is, could you imagine something like Auschwitz bar? It wouldn't be really funny, and I don't think you will invite your Jewish friend to hang out in Auschwitz bar. It will be
but I think what Ian was trying to ask is, and also my is if we just rephrase it somehow, what was the intention of that law initially? The intention and what we do really get in reality. So if you have some ideas on that.
I think this law appeared for two reasons. First reason is to legitimize the process that already began from the bottom. I mean the toppling of the Lenin monuments and so forth. Actually,
well, it's an outgrowth of that sort of opposition to symbols, but now in the Rada. But I mean, there's a strong element of populism. Wasn't this introduced by Leszko?
Yes, and I must admit I'm not comfortable to see him as an author. And I think the second reason is we still see this ideology, this communist ideology, Soviet ideology, as a threat If we look back at the process of denazification of Germany after the Second World War, the reason of the same prohibition and the whole denazification campaign was the fear of revenge. First of all, and I think that the reason here in Ukraine is approximately the same.
But I mean, it seems hard because if we bring up this map again that we'd had before, I mean, the important thing to keep in mind is that in most Western countries, it's true, you don't have a prohibition on swastikas or hammers and sickles, but you have some exceptions. You have Germany, you have Austria, and also in some post-communist states, you have restrictions on both, you know, left-wing and right-wing symbolism, fascist and also Soviet. But, you know, the question is, where does it go from here? Because in Germany, after the war, there was concern that the Nazis would come back, that if you had this imagery, they would reemerge as a political force. In some, you know, countries, especially in Central Europe, Poland, Hungary, those areas, they're concerned that communists would reemerge as a political force. But that doesn't seem to be a real issue in Ukraine now. There's concern about Russian influence, but there doesn't really seem to be concern that there would be a communist government or the communists would suddenly take over the whole Rada.
Well, actually, that's what we thought just several years ago. We thought that all these guys with their crazy ideas about Soviet Union, Eurasia, are just like village idiots. Until that moment, they took Kalashnikovs. So, and the same with Russia. Just like 15 years ago, for example, Dugin was a kind of a village idiot again, but now his ideology is actually Russian mainstream, in fact. So maybe we underestimate the threat.
But the symbols don't make the threat go away. I mean, I guess that's the biggest issue for a lot of people, that somehow banning it or saying that you can't have these things. And in Ukraine with this legislation, it's even harder because it's unrealistic to rename all the street names
or just pretending it was
symbols.
not, just pretending it was not here. My question is, does it really help to reconsider and rethink Ukraine's history and Ukraine's past? I mean, even in the academic field, will it give an opportunity, a push to, you know, reconsideration of the past with this law?
Yeah, actually, I think so. I believe taking into account the law is certainly not perfect. Of course, all these critical notes should be taken into account. But at the same time, the context will push the discussion further, and I think that's the most important thing, because people will just stop for a moment and think maybe it's really something wrong in using this symbol just for fun, because there is some terrifying things behind that symbols.
We have an interesting question from our colleague from Natalia Gumenyuk, who is asking your opinion on do you think it will in any way help reconciliation with the people in the East to have strong sentiment in this regard? Will it somehow help, again, reconciliation, understanding?
Well, first of all, there is another big problem with the text, with the law, is the contradiction with actually the constitution, because the name of the city should be a question, an issue for local governments. So it's also the issue of decentralization and of the local authorities, and first of all local communities. It's first of all for them to decide. But at the same thing, I guess it's the case when it's better done than perfect.
But it seems like here what Natalia is bringing up is that it has the potential to intensify divisions in Ukraine, where in eastern Ukraine, some people identify very strongly with the Soviet
that it
imagery.
may worsen the situation. Yeah, I should rephrase it, that it may make the situation even worse.
Because it seems like a
polarizing
element.
Yes,
you have a moment where Ukraine may ban, Nazi symbols, but then also communist symbols at a time when the separatists in eastern Ukraine are relying more and more heavily
Another
on
argument
the same
for the
symbols.
pro-Russia fighters, militants to, again, in the fight against Ukraine.
Well, I think that's a question of evaluation of risks. Actually, how bad the situation is now, and do we have a lot to lose in this area?
Do we? And how bad is it?
I think that that bombing and all hardship that people have in eastern Ukraine and in Donetsk area, it's much more serious challenge than Soviet symbols. I think we should solve these questions first.
We have an interesting reply from our Twitter, from viewers on Twitter. We were asking, is banning communist Nazi symbols in Ukraine a greater threat to freedom than the symbols themselves? And we have Nadia Ivanova saying they are. Decommunization should be achieved through education and choice, not by government restricting freedom of speech. What do you say to that?
Well, I must admit that I'm not comfortable with restrictions, with prohibition, and especially if it's from the side of government. And of course, the best possible scenario for any country, including Ukraine, is something like First Amendment in the United States, when all ideas are free. Yeah, so
well, they're protected under the law.
Yeah, so they are protected by the law. It's very good scenario, but I'm not sure we can afford that. Again.
That's an interesting idea. Well, everything comes into a really complicated field when it comes to Ukraine, especially nowadays. Oksana, thank you so much for joining us tonight.